Prayer. Lord, thank you so much for this day. Pray that you bless our time together. Pray that help us to wade through the information that we have, the misinformation that we're fed on a daily basis, that you will make us wise as serpents, harmless as doves, always able to speak truth and bear witness to the hope that lies within us. Bless us today in Jesus' name, amen. Well, today somebody sent me this, and so you're free to send me title suggestions. I don't always see everything. I have about 30,000 unread emails in one of my email accounts. I can't keep up. And then I have Messenger, I have text, and I have a work email, and it just I feel like I should do like I think his name's Larry Lessig. He was a professor at Stanford Law School, and he just sort of threw up his hands about 5 or 6 years ago and said, "I am declaring email bankruptcy." Sent out a notice to everybody in his contact list, said, if you sent me an email and you think it's important, I guess you can resend it. But now everything I ever received is being deleted because I'm bankrupt in terms of, and it's hard. I mean, this is, as an attorney who sometimes has to produce this information, it's very daunting. I mean, do you see some of these people, like on Twitter, they post like every 20 minutes? It's unbelievable. So you're free to send me stuff, but that doesn't guarantee that I'm going to read it. I appreciate that you send it to me. If it's a complaint, send that to Pastor Charles Atkinson. He handles those. So some of the channels that we're on, we talk each week. I'm going to try to skip through the intro a little bit. Just hit sort of the highlights. These are some of the channels that we're on. We talk about the convergence of events, the acceleration of everything. This is my grid: acceleration, convergent, logistics, and understanding. And as we get closer, I think we'll have a better understanding. This Bible prophecy thing, though, is very complex. I shared this last week. I saw this picture of sort of a three-dimensional music score, and I think it's just a great picture of how Scripture interrelates, and that it's all harmonized, but it can be, if you try to picture it in 3D, it's a little complicated, but we can get through it. So here's just some things. We'll look at some of the news, some of the misinformation, and this week I did a lot of reading in the New York Times. I know I should get hazard pay for that. I should get double pay for that, but double zero is still zero. Anyway, but look, it's, when I said mercenaries of misinformation, I said that. So I read the New York Times. I read the Washington Post. I read, Mark Levin calls it the New York Slimes and the Washington Compost, because I want to know what the enemy's thinking. And they do get to the truth every now and then. Here's an example from the New York Times today. Plunging COVID deaths expected in Africa. And they're like, wait, what's going on? The World Health Organization expects the number of COVID-19 deaths in Africa region to fall sharply this year compared with 2021. The prediction was a hopeful one for the world's least state-approved treatment for Charlie Vector 019er continent, though it reflected a vast undercounting of past infections and deaths and official tallies. So, what caused this? So here's a little, I have underlined this or highlighted it. One important factor contributing to the expected decline, one of the doctors says, was that vastly more people in Africa have had past coronavirus infections than the official case counts would indicate. This is the New York Times today. would indicate, and therefore many more people have some level of immunity that could protect them from severe illness or death, if not from being infected to begin with. I didn't think we were allowed to talk about that. It's amazing. It's absolutely stunning. Here's another article. This is either from the Post or Washington Post. How schools are learning to teach gender identity. Of course, it's Pride Month. Big parades everywhere, all over the country. Tel Aviv, Jerusalem had about 7,500 people out for the Pride parade there. It's everywhere. It's kind of in your face, right? Did you see the Marine helmet? The Pride Marine helmet? It's camouflaged, and it has 7 bullets in the band around all different colors of the rainbow. I bet Putin is just shaking in his boots looking at that. So Matt, this whole thing is just so insane. I'm going to play you a couple clips. There's a new movie out called What is a Woman by Matt Walsh from Daily Wire. You can look, he did a lot of work on it. Go subscribe at Daily Wire and pay for it. I've seen it there's free versions of it on BitChute and other places. But I have a couple clips that I pulled off of his Twitter account. The first is an interview with a board certified, I believe she's a pediatrician that deals with children. She's board certified. Now, Matt, I've heard him interviewed a number of times, and he says as he went around to talk to people and interview them, there was some guy, I think he's a professor, psychology professor, psychiatry professor down at the University of Tennessee. And Matt said, he goes, why are you asking me these questions, Matt? He goes, I'm just trying to get to the truth. Truth? There's no truth. Oh, there isn't? Except what you believe and what you try to shove down everybody's throat? And you'll see a little bit of that in this. These are people that people take their children to, like this lady. Here's what she said.
Male gametes. That's what makes me male.
No, your sperm don't make you male.
Then what does?
It's a constellation.
In reality, in truth, okay?
Whose truth are we talking about?
The same truth that says we're sitting in this room right now, you and I.
No, you're not listening.
If I see a chicken laying eggs and I say that's a female chicken laying eggs, did I assign female, or am I just observing a physical reality that's happening in the world?
Does a chicken have gender identity? Does a chicken cry?
Well,
Does a chicken commit suicide? Let's frame it, because you're trying
to... Chicken has sex like any biological organism.
A chicken has an assigned gender, but a chicken doesn't have a gender identity.
So we assign female to chickens when they lay eggs?
We assume they're female if they lay eggs.
Okay. So here is he's talking to a gentleman who had transition surgery. I want you to listen to the passion of this man who feels he's been wronged and injured. And I agree 100%. But listen to this.
For the first time in history, a marginalized group has a huge dollar sign on the top of their head. We have 5 children's hospitals in the United States promoting that.
What?
That's a phalloplasty. That's a bottom surgery. We have 5 children's hospitals in the United States telling girls that they can be boys at $70,000 a pop in a surgery that has a 67% complication rate. That will kill me from infection, that I can't sue on. We're butchering a generation of children because nobody's willing to talk about anything. I have 3 kids. At the age that they're doing this to kids, I'm not transphobic. I love my kids, and I love other people's kids, and you should too. This is wrong on so many levels.
That man is speaking truth, not a feeling or anything like that. Matt tweeted this the other day, I guess this last night. But if the experts don't want to admit it, they are unconcerned with the loss of women's opportunities because they can't answer the simple question, what is a woman? So he refers them to his video. And the article that is linked to here at Daily Wire says, even the New York Times admits biological men have a huge advantage over women in sports. It's not rocket science. And it's just the way it is, okay? It doesn't mean you're sexist to recognize that fact. And there are women athletes that do amazing things. But when the female Olympic sprinters would finish last compared to the top high school male sprinters, there's an obvious difference. And so what do they want? You just want to have one sport? You just have one basketball team at a college? We can do that, right? What opportunities would women have then? And I'm not opposed to them having opportunities. So here's two things. I don't even have the graphics. There's just so much I can't even keep up. So Title IX rewrite. It's easy for you to say. Title IX is a simple anti-discrimination mandate that prohibits federally funded educational institutions from discriminating on the basis of sex. Yet without congressional authorization or other constitutional authority, the Biden administration is writing new Title IX rules to socially engineer every aspect of the educational experience, from student speech and school athletics to high school locker room use and relationships between adult college students. These draft rules leaked to the media in dribs and drabs have been delayed repeatedly to avoid organized backlash, from the insurrectionists. Talk about them in a minute. There's a new set of insurrectionists out there you need to be afraid of. You'll be shocked. You'll be shocked how they're rising up. Coming up in a couple slides. Behind the scenes, the administration is telling educational institutions that the rules are a fait accompli, demanding enforcement that curtails freedom of speech, due process, and women's rights. You know all those women who've complained about being attacked? All those due process rights are going to be swept away by this. Because the people in charge of the Biden administration are incapable of mentally processing information that would help them get to the truth or to see the problems that they're creating. Our transportation system in the United States is collapsing. We haven't flown for a while. I don't know if we're going to fly for a while. I hear stories from everybody I talk to that's flown. 2 nights in the airport. Get stuck in the airport, flight canceled, can't get a rental car because all the rental cars are gone and all the hotels are booked up by other people. There's a pilot shortage. Hawaiian Airlines came out and said they're like 275 people short of being able to run their airline, which is about the number of people they fired because they wouldn't get the state-approved treatment for Charlie Vector 019er, but they will not hire them back. Go read the article in the New York Times this morning, I don't think anybody I don't think it's a conflict of interest. I don't think anybody in my law firm represents Hawaiian Airlines. The morons in charge of that place. I'm sorry. This ESG stuff, environmental, social governance, you know what's being used for, the environmental social governance rules that are coming on corporations now? That's why we don't have gas and oil. That's what Pam told me. She went and got gas for her SUV last night. $38 for 7 gallons. That was at Costco, the cheapest place in town. It's over $5 a gallon. Pam, it's only 10 miles to Costco, so you might want to, I know what she'll say as well, it's only 25 miles to the golf course you played yesterday. So, and then, then we never sold that. There's rules coming out from the Biden administration about school lunches. And wait, what does school lunches have to do with transgenderism? Poor kids are hungry, we feed them. It's okay. In schools now, you will not get federal funds unless you allow males, real males with real male parts who claim to be something else that they're not biologically. You don't allow them in children's bathrooms, locker rooms. We'll starve the kids to push this agenda. Yeah, I'm mad. This is nonsense. They're tearing society apart. I heard an old interview with Michael Walsh this week. He wrote a great book. I would highly recommend that you get it. He's actually written 2 books on Karl Marx. One was The Cult of Critical Theory, and it is a cult. And Michael Walsh wrote this in 2015. I think it was published in 2015. It's called The Devil's Pleasure Palace, The Cult of Critical Theory, and the tearing down of the West. Douglas Murray has a new book out about the same thing, The Death of the West. It's the murder of the West. It's intentional. And Murray and Walsh both, interviews 7 years apart, both done by Dennis Prager, and they both said essentially the same thing. Marxism and this cult of critical theory offers nothing to replace it. It is solely to tear down the system. And they both said, and I don't even know their Christian status, they can see what's going on. They said it is satanic. That's the term they used. And it is satanic. The devil is on the prowl. And you have to protect your kids. You have to protect those around you. So now they have the school lunch rules. Out in Washington State, they put in place a rule that says, you're driving down the road, you see a cop car behind you, tooting his siren at you with the lights on. You don't have to pull over. You don't. And so here's a report from one of the Washington police say drivers aren't stopping for them. The Washington State Patrol said there's been a dramatic uptick in drivers refusing to stop for troopers and other law enforcement agencies. Now, why would anybody put a moronic rule in place, a statute? It's a Washington State statute. Well, because if you pull people over, they might get arrested, and that might label them as a criminal, and their life is over. And this was a theory when I was in graduate school back in the 70s. And we're pushing 50 years on this. It's called labeling. It's a sociological concept that came out of the University of Chicago, like a lot of other nonsense. And in Indiana University, and I have a degree from Indiana, they have the Kinsey destroyed morals. He was a pedophile. He was a sexual libertine. But everybody cites Kinsey and he faked it. A lot of his research was fake. It's a scandal, but of course there's a Kinsey Institute and that type of thing. Nobody ever goes back and does this. So they were afraid they'd get labeled. So you don't have to pull over. Well, what do you think people who are actually doing things wrong think of that? I won't pull over. This is an editorial in the New York Times. This is one of the most frightening things I've ever seen. Of course, you see they have the coat hanger there, so you know it's about abortion, right? And the writer of the op-ed, this is the editorial page, right at the beginning, I won't enforce abortion laws. This is written by the prosecuting attorney for the county of Fairfax, Virginia. In other words, if the Virginia legislature outlaws abortion in any way, I won't enforce it. This is the guy who's supposed to, let's see, I went to law school. Bill, you went to law school too. I think the prosecutor is supposed to enforce the law. And he's writing an editorial saying, I'm not going to do my job. Then the people in Virginia need to go impeach him and get him out of office. Pretty easy. But this is happening with prosecutors all over the place. His name is Steve Toscano. Unbelievable. My fellow prosecutors also need to protect women's rights. I took an oath of office. Yeah, well, you didn't mean it when you took it. Well, I'm only going to enforce laws that I agree with. Okay, how about this? We only pay public servants that we agree with. If you're not going to do your job, quit. Be a man, M-A-N, and quit. Here's a district attorney, Garcon in Los Angeles. So in Los Angeles, in California, they had a major crime problem. So many years ago, they put in the 3 strikes law. If you get a 3rd felony strike, you're in prison for a long time. And this led to some interesting headlines in places like the New York Times and the LA Times. And they said, prison population increases, crime falls, experts puzzled. I'm serious. There were experts, criminology experts at some of these universities, Berkeley and all this. They put all these people in prison and now the crime rate's falling. Because, a lot of the crimes committed by a very small percentage of the population, or used to be. How about gun laws? In Los Angeles, they don't enforce gun laws. Yet they run around wanting to take everybody else's guns. It's insanity. I'm going to start foaming here in a minute. This is what 2 5-hour energies will do to you in the morning. Like 18 cups of coffee. So Garcon said he put out a rule. We're not going to enforce the 3 strikes thing. His own prosecutors in his office sued him. A lower court said, well, he has prosecutorial discretion. He doesn't have to enforce the law. So they lost. They went up to the appellate court. The appellate court said, you're out of your minds, lower court. We're issuing an injunction. He has to follow the law. Los Angeles District Attorney cannot prohibit prosecutors from seeking sentencing enhancements for defendants under the state's 3 strikes law. They ruled Thursday, June 2nd. The court's opinion affirms a 2021 preliminary injunction issued by Los Angeles County Superior Court Judge James Chalfant. I guess the lower court did issue the injunction, who ruled that Gascon's 3 strikes enhancement ban is illegal and violates the rights of prosecutors. The district attorney overstates his authority, the appellate court said. Concurring with the lower court ruling, he is an elected official who must comply with the law, not a sovereign with absolute unreviewable discretion. And so I have friends who are pushing people to run for prosecutor in California to at least try to stop this nonsense. And I'm fully on board with that. So here's front page of yesterday's Los Angeles Times. A far-right uprising at the polls. Shasta County, beautiful area up in Northern California. Insurrection reaches the ballot box. Look at what this says. They're trying to wrest control of county government away from the traditional Republican establishment. Encouraged him to join their ballot box insurrection. He might be investigated by the FBI. Do you see that they have like some kind of satellite office or something at Perkins Coie, the law firm where Hillary Clinton's lawyer works. The FBI has a relationship with him. He was found not guilty. Washington is a swamp, an inbred fever swamp. That's the kindest thing I could say. Corrupt to the core. Shasta's far right gets militant at the polls. They're actually running for office. They're actually people that vote for them. And some of them have guns. This is the Sunday Review, the editorial section of today's New York Times. In GOP we trust, thou shalt not woke, the doctrine of the irreligious right. So they don't believe in religion, but they can tell you that the people on the right that oppose this nonsense, they're irreligious. Because why? Because it's a religion. Yuval Harari is a religion guy, the guy from Davos, who says, hey, I like coming to Silicon Valley. I played the clip on a midweek update a month ago. He went to Google in 2015 at their headquarters, said, I love coming to Silicon Valley. He's an atheist, gay atheist. He says the resurrection in Bible is fake news, but I love coming to Silicon Valley because this is where the religions that will control humanity in the 21st century are being created. He's a religious zealot more so than any Christian I ever met. And he sold 40 million books. Better learn what he's talking about. Protect your kids from him. So this is what the New York Times, big editorial page, front page of the editorial section, 2-page spread. They did like 15,000 words on Tucker Carlson a few weeks ago. I mean, like 4 double pages inside for 3 days in a row. I don't think they like them. Just kind of, I'm a lawyer, I'm paid to analyze things, and that's my conclusion. So here's our friends up north. Before I tell you this, in Canada, they have now legalized the possession of small quantities. In Vancouver, they got a waiver from the federal government. Ottawa and Toronto, I believe, have also asked for waivers to allow people to have possession of small amounts of certain controlled substances like fentanyl, cocaine, that type of thing. Because why? Well, because we have an addiction problem. So we're going to remove a barrier to them having the stuff they're addicted to. We have a massive, we had 100,000 people in the United States last year that died from fentanyl overdoses. Do you care about those people? But Justin Trudeau is going to make everyone safe. He had this announcement to make the other day in front of his fellow wokesters.
But as a government, as a society, we have a responsibility to act to prevent more tragedies. Last summer, during the campaign, some politicians said they would make assault-style weapons legal again. Not only did we stand up to them, but we promised to go even further to protect our communities. We proposed to invest to help provinces and territories put restrictions on handguns within their jurisdictions. However, in our discussions with law enforcement, advocates, and experts, it became apparent that we needed a different solution. So we decided to take a new route, something that would tackle this issue at a national level. And so today, we're moving forward. We're introducing legislation to implement a national freeze on handgun ownership. What this means is that it will no longer be possible to buy, sell, transfer, or import handguns anywhere in Canada. In other words, we're capping the market for handguns.
That applause goes on for a while. I will tell you just a kind of advice for people in Canada. If you're looking for a handgun, go down and walk into Trudeau's residence. Just kind of walk through the door. I'll bet you'll see some then. You might even see some AR-15s. This guy tweeted, pick this up off of a Fox show I happened to catch. Spike Cohen. The U.S. government has been arming Ukraine because they're allies. The U.S. government has been seeking to disarm Russia because they're opponents. In totally unrelated news, the U.S. government seeks to disarm you. Another poll, this is from the Wall Street Journal. Majority backs upholding Roe versus Wade. Listen, I'm telling you, the opinion's coming out in the next 3 weeks. There's about 33 decisions that should come out by the end of June. Just be careful where you go, because I think there's going to be chaos. They're really stoking the anger over this. And by the way, Roe gets overturned, California can still have abortions. Now, I don't think they should be able to. I could make an argument that the right to life is guaranteed under the Constitution for everybody. So they'll be upset with that decision. This decision, though, is probably okay. California court rules a bumblebee is a fish under environmental law. A bumblebee is a fish under California law. California court said in a ruling this week. And thus, the bumblebee should be protected by the state's endangered species ordinances, court documents show. In the case, Almond Alliance of California versus Fish and Game Commission, the California State Appellate Court of the 3rd District said the issue presented here is whether the bumblebee, a terrestrial invertebrate, falls within the definition of a fish, according to legal documents. According to the judges, the bumblebee is classified as a fish, as a liberal interpretation of the word fish, as well as the state's own legislative history, including non-aquatic life. And so I would classify the judges then, if that's the standard, you're a bunch of dirty rats. Same logic. Might want to look for this one on Rumble. The Bilderbergers are getting together to meet. They always say, well, we're not doing anything. That's just a conspiracy theory. Now they publish it. You go to Bilderberg meetings, the official website. And this is what they talked about back in 2019 when they had the last meeting. The last 2 years they didn't because of Charlie Vector. So here's what they were talking about 2 years ago. So I'm going to show you what they talked about 2 years ago and then what they're talking about right now. They're meeting right as we stand here. I stand here and talk this Thursday through Sunday. A stable strategic order. What next for Europe? Climate change and sustainability. China, Russia, the future of capitalism, Brexit, the ethics of artificial intelligence, the weaponization of social media, the importance of space, cyber threats. So that was 3 years ago. This year, they're talking about geopolitical realignments, NATO challenges, China, Indo-Pacific realignment, Sino-US tech competition, Russia, continuity of government and the economy, disruption of the global financial system, disinformation. Knew they'd get that one in there. Energy. This is probably a group I would put within the mercenaries of misinformation. They would fall within this category. Engineering, security, and sustainability, post-pandemic health, fragmentation of democratic societies, trade and deregulation in Ukraine. Now, I don't know if some of these are maybe their goals, these people, like this fragmentation of democratic societies. It seems like people in charge want to do that. And they're succeeding. So here's this slide kind of compares the two side by side. A lot more interesting. Even among the elites, there's more to talk about than this. a lot of things in the economy. I'm not going to spend a lot of time about it. Oil prices rise as EU blocks imports from Russia. And so let's see, how does this work? So Russia has gas and oil, and they actually have a lot of diesel oil comes from Russia. They refine it there. And so the EU's blocking that. Well, that's the world, because of ESG and other things, they haven't been building refineries elsewhere. So all of a sudden, there's a lot of demand for a smaller supply. I'm no economist, but that seems like supply and demand law ought to work, that the price should go up. Has the price gone up? And Biden's like, whoever's speaking in his ear, tell him, is like, I don't know why this is. Why the shortage of diesel? 325,000 barrel Philadelphia refinery permanently closed in 2019, and its production was replaced by Russian refineries that are now sanctioned. Now we don't have diesel. We don't have diesel. You don't have food. You don't have food being grown. You don't have food being harvested. This is a major problem. We're at the beginning of the problem, in my opinion. Now, the question will always be, well, is this one of the horses of Revelation? Well, look, there's a big argument. Have the seal's been open, or are the horses just mounting up? They're mounting up. There's just no doubt about that. All of the four horsemen. Why did, this energy company, why did they know they were getting no more diesel weeks ago? Because the government knew that Ukraine was going to shut off 30% of Europe's natural gas, and it has to be replaced by American diesel. Now, Jamie Dimon, a few weeks ago, he said, he was interviewed, he's the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, Chase Bank, the largest bank in the United States, one of the largest in the world. And he said, look, there's storm clouds gathering, but I think it's going to be okay. And then a couple weeks ago, he said, I see storm clouds, but they're going to be okay. Well, here's a report from the front page of the Financial Times in the UK. Jamie Dimon has warned investors to brace themselves for an economic hurricane as the war in Ukraine and policy tightening by the U.S. Federal Reserve rocks markets. Well, here's what he said. This was at a thing on Wednesday, a conference, Strategic Decisions Conference, and he said this.
It's a hurricane. Right now it's kind of sunny, things are doing fine. Everyone thinks the Fed can handle this. That hurricane is right out there down the road coming our way. We just don't know if it's a minor one or Superstorm Sandy or Sandy or Andrew or something like that. And you better brace yourself. It's a hurricane. Right now it's kind of sunny, things are doing fine. Everyone thinks the Fed can handle this. That hurricane is right out there down the road coming our way. We just don't know if it's a minor one or Superstorm Sandy or Sandy or Andrew or something like that. And you better brace yourself.
Okay. By the way, I don't have a graphic for this. I will spare you this. But his comments were made a day after U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, who used to head a thing called the Federal Reserve, which handles something called monetary policy in the United States, controls the money supply. She said in a CNN interview that she had been wrong last year on the threat posed by rising inflation. Quote, there have been unanticipated and large shocks to the economy that have boosted energy and food prices and supply bottlenecks that have affected our economy badly that I didn't fully understand. I would suggest you still don't understand it. South Korea warned of an economic typhoon. They have typhoons in Asia, not hurricanes. Here's some things about fertilizer prices far outstripping the growth in price of stocks. You see the yellow, the price of fertilizer, and you see the price of crops, how they've gone up a little bit. U.S. diesel prices are at record levels. Some places they're approaching, if not over, $10 a gallon. This is causing problems in China, though. They did all these crazy lockdowns because of Charlie Vector. Their economy is hurting. But they're threatening. They're flying planes over Taiwan. They're running boats by Taiwan. And the question is, are we prepared for this? Because all they got to do is run a few boats over there. They have 1.4 billion people. Taiwan has 20 million. But Taiwan is probably the most important chip manufacturing thing on the planet. And China could blockade them overnight, put up a blockade. And they're threatening to do it. They had like 30 planes, bombers flying over. Some editorials in the Financial Times talking about, this is just from one day, trouble ahead as the world food crisis starts to bite. A report by Standard & Poor's predicts the food crisis will last through 2024 and possibly beyond. It warns that it could affect social stability, economic growth, and sovereign ratings. The International Rescue Committee has alerted the world to an impending hunger fallout in which 47 million more people, mostly in the Horn of Africa, the Sahel, Afghanistan, and Yemen, could be pushed into acute hunger. It doesn't take a particularly paranoid leader to sense trouble ahead. Many recall the origins of the Arab Spring, which started at least symbolically in 2010 with the self-immolation of a Tunisian vegetable vendor. Rising food prices in 2007 and 2008 sparked riots worldwide. Putin's invasion, not the resulting sanctions, is the main cause of this ministry. I disagree with that. It's been coming on a lot of different levels. Still, the West should take seriously Saul's complaint, that's one of the financial people in the UK, that the West should take seriously Saul's complaint that sanctions on Russian banks have made it difficult, if not impossible, to buy grain and fertilizer from Russia. One EU official admitted there was a glitch in the sanctions regime and it must be fixed. Well, goody for him. Here's another one. CBDCs hold wholesale appeal for central banks. What's coming? Programmable central bank digital currencies. And they've been warning about this. The Financial Times has taken a position against this. And remember, this was the one of the heads of Alibaba at Davos last week saying, well, we have some ways to handle climate change.
We're developing, through technology, an ability for consumers to measure their own carbon footprint. What does that mean? That's, where are they traveling? How are they traveling? What are they eating? What are they consuming on the platform? So, individual carbon footprint tracker. Stay tuned. We don't have it operational yet, but this is something that we're working on.
Interesting that he said that at the Society of the Carbon Bigfoot print people in Davos, with their flying in on their private jets. This is crazy. So there's one more article here. Oh, this one down here, it says, Ukraine's fight for freedom exposes sovereign Europe as a delusion. We all believe in sovereignty now, but in ways which are often incompatible. Ukrainians fight for their national independence, and by doing so, prove their ability to act as a truly sovereign people. By contrast, calls for a more sovereign Europe, led by President Emmanuel Macron of France, remain elusive in nature, exposing the limits of the EU's power vis-a-vis Vladimir Putin's Russia. The shared outrage over the Russians' invasion of Ukraine initially strengthened European unity. But the challenges that the war has generated appear to be reinforcing European disunion. Central and Eastern European states, with the notable exception of Hungary, strongly support Ukraine's fight for territorial integrity, while Germany, France, and Italy seek ways to accommodate Russia. Why? Because they have to get oil and gas from Russia. I saw a chart. Gas prices in Europe are up 39.7%. Factor that in. Price of food, heating, cooling. Germany decommissioned all of its nuclear plants. You can't bring those back online overnight. Decommission coal burning plants all over the world because we're going to do solar and wind. Yeah, but it has to be on 24/7 to work. So where do you have solar 24/7? Other than on the sun, these are the people that are in charge. This is kind of an interesting article from yesterday's Wall Street Journal. It's called 2013 Miles, No Gas, Many Hassles. So she rented an electric car. I don't know if it was a Tesla or whatever, let's assume it was, to drive from Chicago to New Orleans and back over a period of 4 days. What happened was she drove there to test the feasibility of taking a road trip in an electric vehicle. She spent more time charging it than she did sleeping. Now, I live, in a nice community, and there's Teslas all over the place. We drove out to Yellowstone and Tetons, beautiful country out there. We didn't see any Teslas out there. There weren't any. Why? Because it's not practical. Unless you pull your own gas generator to generate the power that you, remember that graphic that I used? So, but it's okay. Because, Davos, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. Well, once we get you the drugs that you need, you'll be happy. You'll get along with it. Big topic at Davos this year was defining and building the Metaverse. They have a whole website devoted to it. It says the Metaverse is a future, persistent, and interconnected virtual environment where social and economic elements mirror reality. Users can interact with it and each other simultaneously across devices and immersive technologies while engaging with digital assets and property. Just stay home and pretend you're doing something. This is from their website, Moving from Theory to Practice. My friend, she writes on their WordPress under Grandma Jerry, Geri. She had a good article on the Metaverse this week, if you could look that up on WordPress. Moving from Theory to Practice. Here's one aspect of the Metaverse. This was reported this week. We don't need babies. We will have. This is creepy. Virtual children. Babies. And they're recommending, this is from The Guardian, it was all over the British press. Tamagotchis will replace babies, says AI expert. Virtual kids to save the planet's digi-babies for just £20 a month. Excuse me. Within 50 years, it's going to happen sooner than this, the way they're going. Technology will have advanced to such an extent that babies which exist in the metaverse are indistinct from those in the real world. And now I'm going to ask a question. Can you abort one of these? Are you going to be charged with murder if you turn it off? There are already digital rapes happening in the metaverse. Won't take that long, said one of the AI tech they interviewed. What's the point of all this? That some people might decide never to be pregnant ever again. That already happens, doesn't it? True, but for loads of reasons, including concerns about the environment, overpopulation, the rising cost of bringing up a child. Tamagotchi kids. She wrote a book on AI. Virtual digital children will exist in the metaverse. This AI expert predicts that it will be commonplace and embraced by society within half a century. She has called this digital demographic the Tamagotchi generation after those digital pet toys from Japan. Remember? I don't, but I guess they were popular. How's that going for Japan anyway? Yeah, they had all the virtual toys. Here's a report. This is from the Washington Post today. As births continue to fall, Japan records its largest natural population decline. 1.4 million deaths last year, 600,000 births. How long can a society sustain that? 30% of the Japanese population is over 65. Elon Musk said on Twitter that Japan could eventually cease to exist. This, of course, was viewed as racist. But the response of commentators was, well, Japan won't cease to exist because we'll just allow immigration. Okay, well, let's see. Ukraine, Italy, Russia, birth rates under 1.3. Worse than Japan. Not getting any immigration from there. The fall in population in Ukraine is just, it's what happened to Syria over a decade happened in 3 months. The country will never be the same again. Oh, by the way, China, it has the same kind of birth rate. Its population in 30 years, let's say the Lord doesn't, whenever I say this, people say, oh, so you think the Lord's not coming back? I don't know. I'm just saying this, when you're projecting these things out, China will lose half its population over 30 years. You think the Chinese leadership knows this? Mm-hmm. Worst birth rate decline in human history is in the nation of Iran. You think the Ayatollahs know this? Yep. You think they're going to hold back for 30 years to go after their archenemy, Israel, or the United States? They're operating on a short time frame window. That's what I think. This was an editorial picture cartoon from the New York Times this morning. It's like the octogenarian, when are these people ever going to retire? It's like the old folks' home at Congress. Helen Thompson, who has written a book, let's see, I got to look close, I can't. She's author of Disorder, Hard Times in the 21st Century. So we'll make her the guest prophecy updater this week. There's plenty of candidates, but she wrote in the Times, I think it's in today or yesterday's, here's the crux of the crisis. We in the West are running out of energy because we're not making it. We're taking away rights. I mentioned this last week, the panopticon, that thing in a circular prison where they can see everything you're doing, but you can't tell if they're looking at you. And then somebody suggested, well, that sounds like Facebook. It is one of the greatest graphics ever. And we have to do this, I think I played this last week. This is the e-safety minister from Australia. I don't know if I think I mentioned it first hour. I think I mentioned it. I was on David Fiorazo, Stand Up for the Truth, if you want to look up that podcast on Thursday. But a friend of mine from Australia, we actually had breakfast here once, wrote to me and he said, your updates are so depressing. I'm going back to 2020 to and listen to the ones from 2020 to cheer myself up. The 2020 was no picnic. So here's the e-safety commissioner from Australia at Davos last week. I played this, but I think it's important because it sort of shows what the mercenaries of misinformation are thinking about.
I mean, I guess I'd just say we are finding ourselves in a place where we have increasing polarization everywhere, and everything feels binary when it doesn't need to be. So I think we're going to have to think about a recalibration of a whole range of human rights that are playing out online, from freedom of speech to the freedom to, to be free from online violence.
Recalibrate the freedom of speech. That means, are you allowed to say calibrate? Caliber? Are you even allowed to talk about that? Here's the film section of this morning's New York Times. The myth of liberal Hollywood. Well, there's some misinformation right there. You need misinformation. You can get if they put misinformation in that, like the toilet paper comes in those jumbo packs of rolls, you can put one New York Times in there as a jumbo misinformation pack, delivered digitally to your desktop. George Soros of Davos said, you know what, this Russia thing could turn into World War III. And it's hard to figure out what the truth is. Ukraine is having a tremendous morale problem. They're fighting. Again, this is another editorial of the New York Times this morning. Russia is down, but not out. I think that's right. They've had major problems. So they've lost thousands of people. And they're not that big a country. I mehave the economy of their economy is smaller than Texas and Florida's combined. But they have 144 million people. What's the joint population of Texas and Florida? 35 million? Like 1/5 the size, 1/4 the size, with the same bigger economy. So, but they have nukes, okay? I would be concerned, by the way, really concerned if California and New York had nukes. That would bother me, okay? And it bothers me what's going on. Barrages in the east take heavy toll on the Ukrainian army. And again, this is from the Times. Morale suffers as Kyiv's losses grow. I don't know if I have a clip of this. I don't. That's George Soros, and I will. It's hard to understand. You really need subtitles with him when he's speaking English. This is an area of conflict. Let's talk about the Middle East a little bit. I have about 15 minutes of some stuff I want to talk about that I think is kind of significant. I continue to think that these Abraham Accords are important. A couple of the things that are sort of against that is Lebanon, which I think if Psalm 83 is a prophecy about how these countries interact at the last days, Lebanon has still not come on board. Syria is still not on board. These are the oil and gas fields in the Levant. Hezbollah is having a lot of, Nasrallah is on. He's talking about they're taking our oil and gas and we'll fight them. And here's from a clipboard that he did in a speech a while back, showing that this is our stuff and Israel's taking it and it really belongs to us, which is typical. This is an article from Jewish News. The Abraham Accords are like no other peace deal with Israel's neighbors. Yaakov Katz had a great editorial last week in the Jerusalem Post, The Other War That's Coming, talking about Lebanon. Does anyone really believe that when Israel does to Beirut what looks like Russia did to Mariupol, the world will stand by and applaud? Because everybody says there's a war coming. Question is, how imminent is it? Some people think it's going to happen. I think there's some logistical issues for Israel. They don't have refueling planes yet, so that's going to be a problem. But it's interesting. Go look up Caroline Glick's podcast this week, Caroline Glick Show on YouTube. It's about 50 minutes long. It's short for her, but she also has a good article in Israel Hayom from Friday talking about the kind of strange parallels between out-of-control judiciary and crazy leftists in Israel and the out-of-control judiciary and leftists in the United States. It's a very interesting article, but she makes a good point in her podcast. They had this Yom Yerushalayim, Jerusalem Day celebration, the celebration of the reunification of Israel. Jerusalem in 1967. And they said, if we march around the Temple Mount with flags, it's going to be World War III, everything's good. And so they did it, and nothing happened. And Caroline makes a phenomenal point. Stand up to these people. Take a stand for crying out loud. And they'll run away like scared lumberwoods. So Sinwar, the guy who heads up Hamas in Gaza, remember I played some clips of his speech probably a month ago now, where he said, we're going to tear down Jerusalem. They're storming Al-Aqsa. Well, there were 600 Jews walked around up there yesterday or today. Not storming anything. But now there's, our State Department, Blinken, and all these guys. Boy, if there's ever a guy who's got an appropriate name for Blinken, for the way he acts in his job, he's running around saying, oh, you can't have settlements. You can't have Jews living in Judea and Samaria. What's wrong with you? And so he kowtows to guys like Nasrallah.
انتبهوا ألا تكونوا وقودا لحرب أهلية يقودكم إليها الإسرائيلي في هذا البلد.
This is a Hezbollah guy up in Lebanon. Because they had a big election and they're still fighting. And their country's a mess. Their parliamentary system in Lebanon is so convoluted and impossible for anybody to, it's tearing the country apart. I'll tell you how bad it is. It makes Israel's parliamentary system look like better than anything our founding fathers in America came up with. And that's that's a pretty good analogy. So Iran continues to do their thing, throwing gas on the fire. There have been some people standing up to Hezbollah, but Jonathan Spire, a week ago in the Jerusalem Post, says, I don't think this is going to get better. You had the guy, the foreign minister from Turkey, actually went to Yad Vashem, was up on the Temple Mount. This is about a week and a half ago, before Yom Yerushalayim Day. And look, Turkey's fomenting trouble in East Jerusalem and other places. Erdogan has said he's going to send 1 million refugees to a safe zone in northwest Syria. And because he is fighting against the Kurds, he says they're all terrorists. He wanted this 30-mile buffer zone. And he told Russia, I'm invading Syria. And he's like, Russia, you can do whatever you want. You're busy. He's also told Finland and Sweden, you support the Kurds, you're not getting into NATO. I have veto power. Don't talk to me about it. So here's where he wants this 30-mile buffer zone. He does not control the blue areas. He wants to control those because it gives him a buffer against Kurdish incursions into Turkey. There's some old maps. This is from back in 2015, I think. You can see how he had redrawn the map in this article. This appeared in Turkish papers because he wants to restore the Ottoman Empire. And this is kind of interesting map. And Turkey's a big player in the end times. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. And look, they didn't control that big area of Saudi Arabia, and there was a reason for that. Nobody lives there. It's desert. Okay? And they control Mecca and Medina. Then it got controlled by a guy called the sheriff of another article, Erdogan trying to take advantage of things in Syria. Jonathan Spire, this is Seth Frantzman of Friday's Jerusalem Post, about how he's trying to foment trouble in Syria, taking advantage of what's going on in Russia, in Russia's distraction, and he wants to rebuild the Ottoman Empire. A big celebration this week of 1453 when the Turks took control of Istanbul. I should have put the clip in. I'll try to play it in the future. He wants to get into this agreement with Israel. He wants to, hey, Israel, you don't need to go 9,000 foot deep over there to Crete. Just send a pipeline to Cyprus. I control 40% of Cyprus, Erdogan would say, and I have pipelines anyway. We can build that. It's just a little ways up there. You'll get your gas going to Israel, and Israel's trying to send it through Egypt, and that remains to see how much they're going to do. Israel and Iran continue to have conflicts. Now, I'm going to talk about Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman in just a minute, but these are these continuing. It's not safe to be in the Iranian Revolutionary Guard right now. We showed there was an assassination in downtown Tehran a little over a week ago. This guy on the left, media outlets affiliated with the Iranian opposition report that Colonel Ismail Zadeh, a commander in Unit 840 in the IRGC Quds Force, was found dead near his home in the city of Karaj. These sources also reported that Zadeh was close to Hassan Zayed Kadai, the senior officer that was assassinated about a week and a half ago in Tehran in an operation attributed by the Iranians to Israel. According to sources affiliated with the Shiite Axis, Ismail Zadeh was found dead on Monday, May 30, just 8 days after the death of his friend Kadai. It looks like he jumped from the roof of his house. Okay. This report came out. Now, this report's a little bit misleading. I probably tweeted it out too quickly before I read it. Iranian breakout time now at 0. This is from the Institute for Science and International Security. ISIS. They might want to rename that. But I have a bookmark section in my browser for like all these think tanks: Atlantic Council, INSS, Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, Begin Sadat Center, IDSF. I didn't have time to put that clip in either. We had a briefing with IDSF this week. I'll talk about that in just a moment. But anyway, this came out from this institute, Iranian breakout timeline now at 0. In other words, they could have nuclear weapons anytime. I don't think that that's inaccurate. It's sort of like, I guess they did the headline for clickbait. It's probably going to take them 6 to 8 months to have at least a crude nuclear weapon. But it's sort of like you want them to get to that, over that threshold, because once they're there, you can't ever walk it back. So you can download that at the International for Science and International Security website. Israel is they're simulating a massive attack on Iran with hundreds of aircraft, jets, refueling tankers and everything, flying into Crete. And they're drilling, this is Anna, I can never pronounce her name, from the Jerusalem Post, drilling for a devastating war. They went all out at home and in Cyprus, training for fighting a war with Hezbollah. So they went all the way to Cyprus and all the way to Crete for this training. Greece helped them out. And the reason for that is that from Israel to Crete is about 1,000 miles, maybe a little bit less. Guess how far it is from Israel to, say, Tehran? About 1,000 miles. So they were practicing. And so I think the problem in Israel right now is they have, based on what I've been able to research, about 13 refueling tankers. But that's a long way for a fighter aircraft to fly. They went to Iraq, but that was much closer. They bombed that reactor in Syria back in 2007 or 8. And they had external fuel tanks on that particular aircraft. I don't think they have external fuel tanks yet for their F-35s that they've bought and enhanced. And then the other problem, too, is a lot of the drone manufacturing in some of it has been moved to Tajikistan, which is another 1,000 miles further. So Israel was also doing naval maneuvers. They have some submarines. Naftali Bennett talked about their laser system that they have, that they are, they're going to be able to fire rockets out of the sky. That's a picture. Here's a little video that the Rafael Systems made up about the radar system. They use Gaza and Lebanon as examples, and you'll see how this thing works. Now, it's very good. It's state-of-the-art. I don't know that any other country's been able to put it together. And as Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, so I've kind of choke on that term, but it blows up. It shoots a laser and it blows up missiles, mortars, balloons that are carrying, incendiary devices. And as Naftali Bennett says, look, this thing, it costs $100,000 for an Iron Dome rocket. Well, that pretty soon will bankrupt you. These can be done for about $3.50. Now, the problem, though, is that their range is not very good. 1 or 2 kilometers right now. They hope to increase that by 20 times, but that's 12 miles. So so you have to get them all manufactured, put in place. That takes time. There's a logistical issue to that. So, but you can see it's pretty cool, Star Wars type stuff. And it's much cheaper. It'll shoot down drones. And it's interesting, in the video they did, this is from last year, they showed drones coming in from Syria and Lebanon, missiles as well, and they were able to shoot those down with this laser system. And that's because, this is a drone underground, about 100 meters underground drone base in Syria. In Iran. They released a video of it. Now, people have stopped the video and said, well, look at this fire extinguisher over here in the corner. This is in such and such a place. Like they didn't think, you put up a high definition video of your secret base, somebody might try to find it. So they tried to blur it out, but Israel kind of got it ahead of time. So this drone thing is a big deal. This is China. They have this is a, let me just shut this down. This is a drone carrier, artificial intelligence, remote controlled drone carrier to handle hundreds of these things. So, let's see. And this is Alma Research. It's another one of the think tanks that I bookmarked. They've been looking at how's Hezbollah getting all these precision-guided materials from Iran, and what they're finding out is people are putting them in their luggage and bringing them on flights from Tehran to Beirut or to Damascus, and then they're transferred to Hezbollah. And a guy leading this up is a guy named Rita. He is married to Soleimani's daughter, the person who was assassinated in January of 2020. She lives in Tehran, so he makes trips back and forth, and they're thinking that's how they're smuggling all of this stuff in. Interesting article. This is in the Haaretz. Erdogan is on a campaign to conquer the Middle East. That seems to be true. Now, I'll probably... Well, let me just mention this. So IDSF, General Amir Avivi is the CEO of that. I try to help set up, notify people here in the United States when they're having these briefings. I've tried to do it to Bible Prophecy and Israel Supporting Church people. They had one the other day, and they had Dr. Mordecai Kadar on. Now, I think Dr. Mordecai Kadar is a national treasure for Israel. He is, I think he's in his 70s. Very intelligent. He knows Islam, Muslim thought, the tribal nature of Arab society. He's the one who back in the 2000s, he did a great talk. You can find it online, Mordecai Kadar, Kedar, about how this all this stuff about the Temple Mount and Al-Aqsa Mosque being the farthest mosque, and this is where Muhammad, rode the horse to heaven. This is all nonsense and made up. It's not the farthest mosque. That was actually in Saudi Arabia. So General Avivi and Dr. Kadar did a briefing on Thursday, and I'll just sort of if you want a link to it, get in touch with me somehow. I can get you the link to the recorded Zoom call. Dr. Kadar essentially said this: listen, the way that Arabs, as a general rule, and Jewish Israelis think about Israel is very different. They're Muslim, the Arabs. By the way, IDSF, the purpose of the briefing was to give us some information about a poll that they did among Arab people. And they found out that 75% of the Arabs don't think that Israel really has a right to exist as a sovereign country. Of Arabs living in Israel, 75%. This is a problem. Oh, look, not all Arabs are bad. I'm not saying that. But you got to deal with the problems that you have, right? 25% said if another Arab country attacked Israel, they would join forces. And Dr. Kadar says, listen, for us, for them, it's just sort of, it's an entity that doesn't exist because Islam tells us that this is their land. They own this land. They had it at one point, and for the rest of time, it's really Muslim property. And Israel comes along, and Israel is like, he said, for like 2,000 years, we were praying to be coming back to Jerusalem. And it came true in our lifetime. And it's a prophecy fulfillment, in my opinion. They're not perfect. A lot of problems there. They're not what I would call the redeemed people of God. The United States isn't either, for keeping score on that. But, by the way, I got access to a study. The number of Messianic Jewish people in Israel in active congregations has tripled or quadrupled over the last 15 years. So that's significant growth. I mean, every church in America would love to have that kind of growth. And I think this is the beginning of fulfillment of a prophecy that we read about in Romans chapter 11 and elsewhere about what's coming. But Dr. Kadar says, listen, we long for this. This is this is a religious connection that we have to this land. And that's why we will fight for it. It's very, like I said, I think that he said, so Israel fulfills two roles for Jews. It's fulfillment of a dream to come back to Zion and rebuild. It is a dream. We have a Jewish soul. Jewish religious holidays are national holidays. The flag is the tallit. The emblem of the state emblem is a menorah. The state was built by Jewish genes. It is the collective us. It's like wired into our DNA. This is it's kind of emotional to me too. The other function is that it gives us what the state will provide to us. On the Arab side, the fulfillment of a dream, it is not a fulfillment of any dream. The services that the government provides, and they do not get what the state gives the Jews. That's what they say. Kadar says they actually get more. So Israel exists, right or wrong. And he said the quarter that probably supports Israel in the survey, his conclusion and General Amir Avivi's conclusion was that quarter is probably the Druze, which are kind of a strange Muslim Christian mix. It's very hard to describe them. And they support Israel. But they say the Arabs say Israel cannot exist. And the one encouraging thing in the survey is they want a National Guard in Israel to support this. So I'm going to cover this. And if you have to leave, go ahead. This will take about 10 minutes. So right now there are these negotiations going on. And you see this in the press. Let's see. Oh, there's that thing. K to 12 must put boys in girls' bathrooms to get federal lunch money. Absolutely insane. And this comes from the Department of, the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Like, they should be involved in this. Like, go get us some food. So there's this group, very interesting website. They have a thing on, it's called FII Institute. It's based in Saudi Arabia. And what you find out is that Arab countries like Saudi Arabia, through Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, and the United Arab Emirates are very much involved with World Economic Forum, Sustainable Development Goals, 2030 Vision, 2030 Agenda, and that type of thing. And this is on the FII Institute. It's called the Future Initiative Institute. And they have ESG principles that they're talking about. They're woke. The Saudis are woke. They had a recent conference coming up this fall called Investing in Humanity, October 25 to 27, subtitle, Enabling what? A New World Order. Another conspiracy theory. Now, so back in this is the king of Saudi Arabia. This is from the website at the Future Impact Initiative, Future Investment Initiative Institute. And you can see here, you see this, the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia. That's the fund that just gave $2 billion to Jared Kushner for his investment fund to take the money and to invest it in Israel. This is Saudi money being invested in Israeli companies in Israel. So here's Mohammed bin Salman back in 2017 at the Future Initiative Institute. And remember, it was right after this that Hariri came and he was in Saudi Arabia. This is November of 2017. And he resigned. And he said, I'm doing it because I'm afraid of Hezbollah. He's in Saudi Arabia when all this happens. Now, he's a dual Saudi Lebanese citizen. He has a home in Saudi Arabia in Riyadh, and he was there, but then he was there for a long time. This was right after he got elected. He resigned, and this is the video of it. And the question was he coerced into doing this by Mohammed bin Salman? And he was detained there for a while, and the word is that to get out of jail card for him cost about $6 or $7 billion. So he doesn't like, so here's another thing from the 2017 conference or 2018 conference. And then this is where Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman announced NEOM. This is that city that's going to be built along the Red Sea, adjacent to Jordan and Egypt. And we're going to do this. It's going to be green. It's going to be sustainable. It's going to be all these things. In fact, I present to you, he said, the line. That's what it's called. It's about 100 kilometers long. It's a linear city that they're building in this area. You can see the Arabian Peninsula there at the southern end of the Gulf of Aqaba. This guy's very ambitious. You'll be able to travel and do this. Here's some other, see how the city runs. And so Egypt is right across the Red Sea there. This shows how they're already starting to build things. They have an airport, they have a resort, I think they even have a golf course. I think maybe we need to go next year, Pam, and don't know if we can drive there, but see, you see Israel, you see how everything kind of fits together. There's Saudi Arabia, you see the Sinai Peninsula, you see Jordan, you see Israel, and in this, and so, very building up, they're a very important oil exporting country. Global energy industry has a new hub. And I mean, there's big plans for this. They're going to spend $500 billion to build it. And by the way, they now have the most valuable company on the planet. You think they have the money to build it? And they're giving $2 billion to Jared Kushner to invest in Israel. And that's kind of interesting. So Mohammed bin Salman, Crown Prince, is effectively the ruler of Saudi Arabia. Now, so you see here their Vision 2030 that he has, that he's put out. He came to power in 2017, immediately started this future initiative thing. Within a year, he announces NEOM. And then in the lower left here, there are two islands that abut up to NEOM. Right there at the southern end of the Sinai. See those two islands there? Those are called the Tiran Islands. That's the Tiran Straits. And they sit there at the entrance to the Gulf of Aqaba. Now, the Gulf of Aqaba is part of the Red Sea, and it's the only part of the sea that Israel has the Mediterranean, and then they have a seaport at Eilat down in the Negev. So Sharm el-Sheikh is in Egypt. They want to build a bridge over there. Egypt has controlled those islands for a long time, but back in 1967, there was a problem that arose. Egypt and Israel were mortal enemies at the time, and Egypt had taken control of those islands after the Saudi Revolution in the 1930s. And so they want to build a bridge there. I don't know if I have this on this one or the next. Here's some of the things they built. Very fascinating thing. So here's a little bit of a picture. So this is the Straits of Tiran and the Gulf of Aqaba leading up to Israel there. And you can see the mountainous nature of it. Well, back in 1967, the Egyptians blockaded the Gulf of Aqaba and shut off the port of Eilat. Well, we know what happened in 67. So you saw the headlines there from the New York Times on May 23rd and May 24th, 1967. They ended up having a war. Here's Shimon Peres, engaged in negotiations. There's Nasser, the head of Egypt. They blockaded ships, and it led to a war. So eventually, the war was over, and there's Nasser. By the way, after the War of 67 and sort of the humiliating defeat that Egypt had, he resigned from office. You'll see a video of it here. He just said, I'm going back and becoming a regular citizen. Now, there was a popular uprising to get him to come back, and he did come back, and he eventually died while they were at this Arab summit talking about what to do about Israel. But Jimmy Carter came on the scene, and we know what Jimmy Carter did. They negotiated a settlement called the Camp David Accords, and in the Camp David Accords, it was agreed that Egypt would not block the straits, the Tiran Straits, ever again. Well, now Egypt, a couple of years ago, gave the islands back to Saudi Arabia. Now Saudi Arabia is in control, but Saudi Arabia is subject to this agreement. And there's a lot of question as to, this is what the Egyptians rising up, and they want their dictator back. And he came back. And then they had the Camp David Accords under Anwar Sadat, who was then, shortly after that, was assassinated by the Muslim Brotherhood. But they agreed that they would not allow the straits to ever be blocked again. Well, now they want to give the islands back to Saudi Arabia. That's not been formalized yet. But Saudi Arabia wants to have access to those islands. Why? Because they have this city that they want to build there called NEOM. Israel has a big railway that goes down to Eilat, to the port there. They want access to the port. And so because of NEOM now, what's interesting is that Saudi Arabia and Israel are talking about some kind of normalization. They don't have any agreements right now. So you see a couple of very strange things. You see Saudi Arabia giving a couple $2 billion to a Jewish man, an Orthodox Jewish man, Jared Kushner, to invest in Israel in his investment fund. And there's these discussions going on, and the Biden administration wants this will be kind of a feather in their cap. And you see, this is important. See the trade routes, the red? These are like sort of combined, consolidated shipping lanes, a very important location. So they're having to go to Israel to get access to these islands and normalizing. So this was published in Daily Sabah a while back, that NEOM is part of his 2030 vision. He wants this to go forward. A very interesting succession issue. He is now the crown prince. There's still, I think, one brother, half brother of King Salman, that a couple of them that could succeed him. All of the kings of Saudi Arabia since Abdulaziz ibn Saud have been sons of his. He had 35. But King Salman is probably the last in that generation, and the power is going to transfer. So there's been some things going on. We know that Mohammed bin Salman really cracked down on things, extorted, or received payments from other Saudi princes and Rafiq Hariri from Lebanon in the billions and billions of dollars, supposedly to reimburse the kingdom for corruption. And he controls all this. I mean, he's incredibly wealthy himself. I think he was born in 1985. So would that make him 37? He has a property in France. It's probably worth $500 million. He has a $500 billion yacht. And he's very ambitious. His father wants to protect the Palestinian issue, and at Davos, one of the foreign ministers from Saudi Arabia was saying, we're not doing anything with Israel until we get the Palestinian issue resolved. Now, that's a thing that King Salman wants to have happen, and because of the nature of their society, they will not do anything on that regard against King Salman until King Salman passes away. And he's in his 80s. He's not in very good health. And so Mohammed bin Salman seems to want to do something with regard to Israel. So they're talking about doing this agreement. This is from the Jerusalem Post. Friday, June 3rd, Israel is set to agree to do security arrangements allowing Egypt to transfer control of 2 islands in the Straits of Tiran to Saudi Arabia, and Biden is expected to announce this on his trip to the region at the end of June. This is a big deal. And look at what the other thing says. In return, Saudi Arabia will allow Israeli airlines to fly over its airspace. Currently, only Israeli flights to the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain can fly over Saudi Arabia. Elsewise, they got to go all the way down around Saudi Arabia or up through other countries where they can get overflight rights. And I think this is a big deal. Now, people think this is going to take a while. Yair Lapid, in an interview with the Jerusalem Post magazine that was published on Friday, said, we're changing something here, and we're making progress with the Saudis, but they're baby steps. But baby steps can turn into big steps pretty quickly in today's day and age. And this is David Weinberg in Friday's Jerusalem Post, Reel in the Saudis. He's part of IDSF. I would highly recommend that you go get that. So this is kind of a big deal. And, I know what this is. So while this is going on, there's been a thing called Arab NATO that sort of came to fruition under Trump. And this is a military exercise of a bunch of Arab countries down there in that area, practicing military drills and that type of thing. Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and other things. So all this stuff is going on with the Abraham Accords and that type of thing. So this is all a big deal. And at the same time, I'll close I think with this, Istanbul plans to unlock grain exports in Ukraine because they're blocking the Dardanelles and the Bosporus to grain exports. Let's see. Now, this is from an Israeli guy in Jerusalem Post. We are on the verge of global cyber warfare. Now, there's a thing that was called Cyber Polygon. It was one of these, like Event 201 was for a virus, or the monkeypox thing that took place. The desktop exercise scheduled for July, but I just got a notification that it's been canceled for this year, so I'm not sure what's going on. A lot of people were concerned about that, but and OPEC's going to increase output to kind of help out the U.S. Oh, and this, in a meeting with the Pope in Aberystwyth, the Jewish organization called for expansion of the Abraham Accords with the Pope. The Pope's always around, it seems like. Anyway, look, there's a lot of stuff going on. I mean, I could go for a long time, kind of giving you a pretty good summary. You can freeze frame this, go look up the stuff, Google what I've cited. If you want a link to the IDSF briefing, I don't think it's on their YouTube channel yet. I might be able to get you a link to it on, I think I might have put it on my, what I call my private YouTube channel, but you have to have a direct link to it. Or I can get you a link to the Zoom thing. And I think you should pay attention to that because it was a very informative, important Zoom meeting the other day. So listen, can we agree that there's a lot of stuff going on? A lot of stuff related to Bible prophecy. And so I don't know how quickly all of this wraps up. I think the stuff going on with the Straits of Tiran, T-I-R-A-N, and Mohammed bin Salman, I think this is all a very big deal in terms of how this thing might unfold in Bible prophecy. So let's pay attention, watch. What's the verse say in Romans? Stand firm in the faith and act like men. And it's really time for the church to do that. I don't know that we're going to turn anything around, but there's people to protect, you know, because they're often said they're coming after your kids. They've come after your kids. They aren't coming, they're here, and got to protect those precious souls. So let's pray. Lord, thank you so much for the day. We pray that you will watch over us. We pray that you'll give us the courage to stand firm in our faith. Give us opportunities to share the glorious gospel of Jesus Christ with those around us. Help us to be informed. Guide us by your Holy Spirit. Give us wisdom and understanding on the things that we see happening around us, and to use that as an opportunity to share the gospel with people as an entry to conversations. Bless us this week. In Jesus' name, amen.